So think about the last time you were driving, or the last time you were going somewhere, and the last 10 minutes, so to speak, you weren't even thinking about the right turn or the left turn or the go forward, this or that. It's just autopilot. You've made the route so many times. You aren't even thinking about it. You know what I'm talking about. And then all of a sudden, maybe you have a young 16, 17-year-old in your house, and you're doing the student driving life, and you're in the passenger seat, which is not where you normally would be sitting, right? Or wherever, right? And all of a sudden, you're driving, and you're like, I don't remember that tree being there. You know what I'm talking about? Because your perspective is different. Or you're like, that house, has that house always been that color? I don't think it has. Yes, it has. For the last 7 years it has. But you're so used to autopilot that you're not even thinking about it. Make sense? The same thing happens not just in the physical, but in our very hearts, where we have such well-worn patterns, such well-worn rhythms and experiences, right? That you're just used to doing life the way that you're doing it. You respond the way you respond. You react the way you react. It's just at this point and at this stage of the game, it's kind of autopilot for you. You simply are who you are at this point. You're not thinking about your emotional right turns and emotional left turns in your heart anymore. It's a well-worn path. And yet, in the same way that you've taken that route on the street so many times and you don't have to think about it, what we're really talking about in this moment emotionally is your past, your history being played out so many times, again and again and again and again, that you aren't even thinking about it anymore. Your past has an incredible way of shaping you and forming you, and many times we live on autopilot, do we not, as it pertains to things that have happened to us. Maybe you think you've dealt with it here, and yet you still find yourself responding emotionally or reacting right here and here and here. It's like it's autopilot. Yeah. What do we do in these kinds of moments? We're in a series called Under the Influence, and what I'm really getting at here is that your past, your history, even young people in the first couple rows, you have history and past that is, in fact, shaping you, influencing you. But what do the scriptures actually have to say about that? More specifically, what does Jesus have to say to you today about that? Is there greater freedom from our past and our pain and our history than many of us have experienced? If you will take your spiritual seatbelt and buckle up today, we just might experience a new measure of freedom. Father, be with us. Lord, I need this message. Lord, I don't think there's anybody here that wouldn't love to walk in greater freedom in you. But we don't even know what that means sometimes. And so, God, I pray that your word would speak to us and minister to us today. Amen. Turn to Genesis. Genesis 32 this morning. We're getting into a story with a gentleman whose name is Jacob. His father is Isaac, and Isaac's father is Abraham. This is God's kind of family that he's using to bring about his promise, right? And I can't get into all the details of the history of creation and all this and all that, but God's purposes are being fulfilled through this family lineage. And we get to Jacob in this moment. And Jacob has a pattern. What is that pattern? He is dysfunction junction with his relationships. My man has got some jacked up things going on. And in this Genesis 32 account, verse 22, we have Jacob who is getting ready to be reunited with his brother Esau for the first time in 20 years. He's going to see his flesh and blood brother for the first time in 20 years. And the last time he left that brother 20 years ago, he did so having deceived him, having lied to him and manipulated him. And he stole his inheritance. He stole Esau's birthright. He stole his father's blessing. As the younger son, he took what was rightfully due the older son. And so Jacob is worried. And that is the understatement of the century. His brother Esau swore that the next time he saw him, he would kill him. And it is now 20 years later. And my man is wondering if his brother Esau is still bent on revenge. He doesn't know. He's a little bit anxious. That's where we find ourselves in Genesis 32. Verse 22, that night Jacob got up and he took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and he crossed the ford of the Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all of his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. And when the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. And then the man said, "Let me go, for it's daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go until you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. The man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans, and you have overcome." Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. Now this story, okay, there is so much in this story, but this is one of those moments in the Bible that can save you thousands of dollars in therapy, okay? This can save you quite a bit of money in counseling sessions, and I'm not even really joking when I say it, okay? There is a lot going on with my man Jacob here. Before we even begin to unpack it, let's just acknowledge the fact that, like Jacob, we oftentimes have moments of tremendous personal conflict with people. You do. It's rare to find the family that doesn't have strain of some kind. Pain and difficulty. Having worked with Pastor Keith Tower in Orlando, I've said this so many times, presume nothing of people that you know except one thing. Presume pain. Everybody is going through something. And whether it's your spouse or a teacher, whether it's a sibling, whether it's a parent, our emotions oftentimes run high with fear or despair or anger or withdrawal or numbness, or go to the emotional pantry and open it and pick whichever emotion you want to pull down from the shelf today, because any one of them would feel pretty valid. And yet, more often than not, the emotional strain that you are experiencing right in front of you with the people that you love and the people that you know, it's not always the case, but more often than not, the wrestle that you're having, the fight, the emotional outburst. Is there an issue that prompted that in the present? Yes. But more often than not, it is a secondary emotion pointing to a greater wrestle and a greater pain and a greater difficulty that most likely happened right back here that you have not fully dealt with. Jacob is wrestling. His name means deceiver. That is literally his identity. From day one, he is manipulated and he has strategized and he has lied. And that is who he has been. And we'll get into why in just a second. But understand this. He sends his family and his possessions and his servants across the river Jabbok. He's getting ready to meet with his brother Esau for the very first time. He's got an evening to himself. And a weird occurrence takes place. A man shows up in Jacob's camp where Jacob is all by himself and they wrestle. What is going on here? And Jacob has the discernment to recognize that this is not just some ordinary battle or fight or wrestle. This is God showing up in a fleshly presence. It's as though God is saying to Jacob, you've been wrestling with people your whole life. And finally, today, who you're really going to wrestle with is me. You've been fighting this fight here with this person and this person and this person and this person. And the real fight that's in front of you, the real one, the issue beneath the issue, it's not any of these people. Your issue is with me. And tonight, we are going to fight it out. And some of you are sitting here today, and you have pain, legitimate pain and legitimate patterns, and they are still shaping you and still forming you and still defining you. And you still have those triggers. Even I do, right? And I recognize it. And so this message is speaking to me as well. This isn't just for you. This is for all of us. There is not a person in human history that doesn't have to deal with their past. No one has a perfect past. No one. And that means there are bumps and bruises, and some are bigger than others. But those things, if you do not deal with them, will continue to reach out of the grave and shape you and form you and define you. And Jacob was who he was. Who was it? Deceiver. Over and over and over again, the same deck of cards playing out in his life until he gets a new identity from God himself. He is wrestling with God, and he has to wrestle with God over his name. Who are you? You think God doesn't know who Jacob is? He is asking for Jacob to own and recognize who he is. You've got to own it, Jacob. Who are you? You know, rah, 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 rah. No. Who are you? Blah, 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 blah. Who are you? I'm Jacob. I'm the one who deceives. That's who I am. God looks at him and says, today, you've wrestled and you finally had the right fight. And you're coming out of it now with a new name. One who wrestles with people. And one who has wrestled with God. And most importantly, you've come out on the other side. You've overcome. I want you to hear this. When we look at Jacob's past, it doesn't take much to see why he is the way that he is. If we rewind the tape, we can see some things. In Genesis 25:28, we see something that is imprinted in the heart of Jacob. It says this in the text that Isaac, this is Jacob's dad, Isaac loved Esau, but Rebekah, his mom, loved Jacob. Jacob grew up in a divided house, but it wasn't the kind of division that you think about, like when we think of divorce or mom and dad going separate ways. The kind of division that Jacob had is a parent who showed favoritism. One parent loved one son and the other parent loved the other. Jacob did not have the affirmation. He did not have the love of his dad. Esau got it. But Jacob had love from his mom. But they are divided. And when you think about first off, some of you have experienced that. This was brought to my attention, and I'm not exaggerating, just a few weeks ago. In my own family, not my nuclear family, but the way that my grandparents treated me versus everybody else. And I didn't even realize it. I caught some of it. Let me be clear. What I didn't realize was the level of pain that it produced in other kids. Some of you have grown up in a house where a mom and dad did that. And you have carried for your life the pain. And you might say to yourself, you know what, I'm through that, it's okay, I'm all good. You're not. You're not. You're not. You're not when those things continue to play out over and over and over again. Here's what it produces. When you have to strive and earn for your parents' affection or your mom or dad's affection, guess what that does for you? Number one, when you hear that God is a heavenly Father, it naturally translates that you have to strive for His affection as well. And so you learn to be competitive. You learn to strain to get that notice and that affirmation. You do whatever you can to get it, even if that means deception. Even if it means manipulation, whatever it takes. And you learn that whatever it takes produces results. And so you become something that you're not in order to try and get what a mom or a dad wasn't willing to give you. Do you think that kind of pain plays out and continues to shape and form you and influence you? You better believe it. But that's not all. Let's get down to it today. Okay? Maybe that's the scenario from the text. But what about, for you, you've had repeated failures. You've had business ventures or things that you tried and they just didn't work out. And for, just from social standards, it would be considered a failure. And so it's humiliating or it's embarrassing or you lost XYZ amount of money or you lost that job, right? Well, guess what happens? You become risk averse later in life. It's very common. You're concerned about failing again. And so you don't take steps of faith. If I try again, I'll probably fail again. And so safety becomes your top priority. happens. Shaping, forming, shaping, forming. Some of you have experienced rejection from groups of friends. Some of you that are young, sitting in some of these front rows. And so what happens when you've experienced rejection? It's easy to just not want to open up later in other kinds of relationships. And why? Because you have experienced hurt and pain. And so you keep that emotional vault locked up. I had a conversation literally with somebody my age, in their 40s. And they were talking about being in middle school. Now, this was in middle school before text messaging. This was landlines, right? And you had the little curly cord, and you could walk like 47 feet around your house with the cord, wrapped around you. You know what I'm talking about if you grew up in this era. Oh, it was a time, okay? But there was a sleepover for, this group of girl friends, and there was a sleepover taking place. And the girl that I was talking to found out about it, but was confused because she hadn't been invited by all of her friends. So she called, figuring that she just missed the memo here. And she said in the background of the phone, she could hear the other girls talking about why they didn't want her there. The whispers, the giggling, and then the lies. And she could hear so much of it coming through that landline. And here she is, over 20 years later, and she still thinks about it. Your past will catch up to you, and it shapes you, and it forms you. Some of you grew up with criticism, harsh words. Mom and dad were just overbearing and heavy-handed, and you could never measure up. You were never going to be good enough. And it just didn't matter what you did. It didn't matter how good the grades were, or how good this was, or the sport was, or the living life was. It just was never going to be good enough. Or maybe it wasn't the parent. It was the church that you grew up in. That God He was just never going to be pleased with you. And so you lived under that cloud. And you know what you do in those kinds of moments? Is that you do everything you can to then live out your life trying to please people and make them happy and to earn approval. And your tendency is to overcompensate by trying to stay in control of everything. Many people who struggle with control have actually dealt with harsh and heavy criticism as a child. They could never live up. And so the only way to respond now is to seize the reins. Guys, making sense today? Yeah. This is what happens. Some of you grew up and it was a poverty scenario. And I use that word. We don't like to say it. But you just grew up without. Things were difficult financially. And so you learn that if I'm not careful later in life, everything could disappear. So you can't give. It's hard to stretch your faith. And here's one of the ways you see this. True story. You see this at a restaurant, you can see this or at the buffet, or you see this at people's homes. You're going to be worried now every time you're in somebody's house. You're going to be like, am I doing this? I want you to hear this. So many times, if you go to that buffet, right, you think to yourself, I've got to fill this plate up. I've got to make my money's worth out of this plate because, after all, it is a buffet. I can't be losing money on this single meal. Far be it from me. So I've got to stack this plate up as high as possible because this is a quote-unquote free meal, free food. I've got to take advantage of this or it might disappear. Or you're at somebody's house and the food is provided, or the church is providing it, or the business is providing it, and you're not having to come out of pocket for it, right? And so what do? We stack that plate up. We're like, yeah, baby, free food, free meal, free this. What's really happening is underneath so much of this is actually a little seed of fear. That somehow I've got to take advantage of this free meal because I don't know the next time a free meal is going to come my way. I've got to take advantage of this. Pile it up. It's subtle, but that's what happens, church. Or lastly, you've lost a loved one. I have. The pain of somebody close, it was sudden, it was gone. Do you think that those kinds of pains aren't shaping you, forming you? Of course they do. Grief, the weight of grief, it does shape you. It does form you. Is it normative? Yes, it is. It's how God designed us to grieve, right? But understand it can still begin to shape you in ways that you don't want. It's like, and I don't mean to say you get over it. I'm not over my father dying at 51. But there are moments, even just recently, where somebody said something and it was like it was a trigger for me. And I'm like, well, I thought I had dealt with that. I thought I had, worked through that. And yet, all of a sudden, I've got more to work through. It was still shaping me and forming me. Here's what happens. You think to yourself, I don't have answers for this. God, why did this happen? Are you really good? Do you really care? God, why did you let this happen? And you have unresolved tension in your heart and in your soul. And that lack of resolve, if you've ever been living, right, without clarity, right? Which direction do I go? How am I supposed to feel? You're just kind of in the no man's land. For many people, that's an anxious place to be because you don't have clarity. And when you don't have answers as to why something happened, and you don't get peace in your heart with just simply trusting God through it. The lack of resolve in that moment, the anxiety of that, it will bubble over and boil over in ways that don't even make sense. It's just like the pot that's boiling the crab. It just pops and the lid comes off and you're like, why am I so angry today? Or why am I so sad today? Why am I the way that I am? And you don't have a great explanation except for the fact that your past is still shaping you. Your pain, it's still shaping you. And there's no shame in that. You don't have to be embarrassed by that. But it is true. And God invites us to deal with the real issue beneath the issue. And that is our wrestle with Him. Nearly every fight, when you really peel back all the layers, is an issue of whether we're going to trust Him, whether we're going to trust Him to be good, whether we're going to trust Him to be powerful, whether we're going to trust Him to care, whether we're going to trust Him. Will you give me a new identity? One that's free, Not one that's just gotten over, but one that is healed and whole and free. I'll say one last thing here, and that is that in Genesis 27:8, one of the other things that takes place that is forming and shaping outside of pain in your past are patterns. And some of you know this in that you saw patterns in your life and you just learned those things, don't we? We just pick them up. I had a house in St. Louis growing up, and behind it was this forest. And you know what happened is all the kids would walk out the back door of my house. We would go into the entrance to like Narnia, so to speak, and you just walk it. And the more we walked it, the more we walked it, the more we walked it, guess what happened? A path was created. Rocket science, right? Grass didn't even grow there anymore. Right? At one point in time, you kind of trim some of the little branches back, but then you just keep doing it and you keep going and you keep doing it, and it just becomes the path, and it becomes the path that everybody takes. And when you've seen something enough, you just learn to do it. It's a pattern. I have to be careful. It's not easy sometimes. In my home, my dad would withdraw in conflict. He would get real quiet and subdued. In my house, my mother would engage and her voice would raise. If there was going to be yelling, she's the one who'd yell. And in my house, I have to be careful in moments of great tension that I don't repeat patterns that I just grew up seeing. And my tendency, if I am not careful, is to be like my mom. My voice will rise when I get angry. And I have to be mindful of not just repeating the patterns that I've seen. In Genesis 27, my son, listen carefully. This is to Jacob, and do what I'm telling you. His mother is teaching him how to deceive his father in this moment. His mom, Rebecca, is teaching Jacob, whose name means deceiver. They named him that. Might I also can we just acknowledge that? You named him deceiver, right? He's fulfilling what you put on him, and then you're modeling it for him. Here's how you, my most beloved son, here's how you can steal the birthright from your brother Esau and get what you get from your dad. Here we go. Do what I'm telling you. Jacob is a deceiver because his mom taught him how to deceive. And it's not the first time. You guys tracking with me? Freedom is possible. Transformation comes when we experience forgiveness through Jesus, but it also comes when God forces us to face things that we have been running from. And many times, you've been running from that wrestle and that fight your entire life. Fast forward all the way to the New Testament, 2 Corinthians 5:17. For time's sake, I'm trimming a little bit out of this. But understand this, even as we get ready to take communion together as a church. Paul, whose history should have been chasing him his whole life. Here's a man who literally had Christians murdered, convicted, arrested. Was he a deceiver? No. But he was religious. He was cruel. He was angry. He was judgmental. And these things had been with him for so long. So he's got his own junk. And then he's talking to the Corinthian church. And the Corinthian church, this is a church that's got a lot of issues and a lot of problems. And so when he writes to them, And he writes, if anyone is in Jesus, he is a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come. Paul isn't just saying that you've been forgiven of your sins, although that is true. Do not lose sight of the fact that when Jesus died upon the cross for your sins, he set you free from that. But also understand this. This isn't just some little self-improvement, pull yourself up by the bootstraps gospel. When Jesus sets you free and gives you a new identity in Him, He is bringing that past to a place of true healing. But you've got to wrestle with Him through it. Sometimes there's a fight over this because it's a fight to trust Him. I can many times trust God to forgive me for my bad choices, right? The sins that I've committed. But can I choose to trust Him with all this too? My identity? The hurtful things that have happened to me? My pain? My past? And my patterns, can I give Him that? Yes, you can. You're being formed by the pain that you haven't surrendered. And many times the patterns that you learned are the patterns that you're still living. And if you're going to get free, you have to bring it to Him. You got to wrestle with Him. And that wrestle is what shapes you into somebody new. Some of you still need freedom over the loss of a loved one. Some of you need freedom over harsh words spoken over you. Some of you need freedom over having grown up poverty-stricken and it's left you afraid. Some of you, ... What do you need? You need Jesus, who is graciously, not angrily, but graciously inviting you to have this wrestle, that you might receive a new identity.